Hey there, how's it going? This is Gyor, if I'm saying that right, Hungary. About halfway between Vienna, Austria, and Budapest, capital of Hungary. This is my second time to Hungary. I was here previously 6 years ago. That time I traveled from Austria to Bratislava, Slovakia, and then took a train or bus, I forget, from Bratislava to Budapest, and then from Budapest went straight to Slovenia. I only visited Budapest on that trip to Hungary. So I could say that I've been to Hungary, but only spent, I think, 5 nights in Budapest. So it's good to be back and see a little more of the country, including this medium-sized city that let's run and get across the street while we can, that I had never heard of until just a few days ago. So the reason that I ended up here is that somebody had recommended Sopron in Hungary as being a nice city. So I'm trying to get into the Old Town area. Nice building there, whatever that is. I don't see a cross on top, so it looks like probably a governmental building. But that is just a random guess. So let's continue on this way. So somebody had recommended Sopron. I checked it out, looked pretty cool, and this is the general direction that I'm heading on my way to probably Romania next. It will likely be a short trip in Hungary for a couple of reasons. One being the old 90 days Schengen zone issue that I've mentioned before, but 90 days in the Schengen countries of Europe. I figured it out earlier today. I have 16 days left. Hungary is in the Schengen zone. Some people were confused when I said that I was leaving Greece because I was running out of time in the Schengen zone, and then went to Switzerland, which is also a Schengen country. I had a month left when I left Greece. It wasn't, over. I had a month left, and I just wanted to make sure and leave time to see other countries. And so spent close to 2 weeks in Switzerland and Austria, and now have a couple of weeks left. But I want to leave some time left for later, so I'm planning to leave Hungary before the 16 days is over. And then, assuming I go into Romania, it is not part of the Schengen zone, and then I will have, 10, 11, 12 days left, something like that, for later to maybe go to Norway or Iceland or something like that. So, am I now in Eastern Europe? That is a very debatable subject, of course. I love Eastern Europe for a whole bunch of reasons, which I will talk about in this video. But first, what is Eastern Europe, and is it a relevant term or useful, or does it even make any sense? Eastern Europe versus Western Europe, is that like dividing up Europe unnecessarily or something like that? So I am from Northern California. Northern California is not a state. The state is just California. It is a very long state, something like 800 miles from the northern border to the southern, and it is quite different in the north compared to the south. So I tend to say I'm from Northern California to distinguish from Southern California, a whole different geography and social scene and different cities, etc. Europe also is a very big place. And so it is just a matter of practical usefulness to refer to Northern Europe, Southern Europe, Western Europe, Eastern Europe, maybe say Southeastern Europe or whatever. It isn't a specific designation, of course. Is Kazakhstan part of Europe at all? That one is debatable. I recently mentioned when I was in Liechtenstein, my 88th country, that now that I had visited Liechtenstein, I had only 2 countries left in Europe to visit. San Marino, a tiny, would you call it an enclave? I think that would be an enclave country that is fully surrounded by Italy. There are only 3 enclave countries in the world. San Marino, Vatican City, also within Italy, of course, in Rome, and Lesotho, entirely surrounded by South Africa. But anyways, I mentioned that I hadn't been to San Marino or Russia yet, but I also haven't been to Kazakhstan, and some would consider that part of Europe, but it's kind of right in that, zone where Europe meets Asia. And then I haven't been to Azerbaijan. Is Azerbaijan considered part of Europe? That is also highly debatable. Europe, of course, is not a distinct continent like Australia, or you could say North and South America are more obvious where the line is, even though they're connected. But of course, Eurasia, Africa are all connected, so you have to kind of arbitrarily pick a line somewhere, especially when it comes to dividing Europe and Asia, because really Europe is not a continent. You could say that Europe is a subcontinent. Calling it its own separate continent would be like calling India its own separate continent. And so it is a very arbitrary designation of what Europe even is. So the city of Gyor is looking very nice. This is my first time getting into the old town. Classic European architecture, of course, or you could say Eastern European. So, whether or not you're going to call Kazakhstan part of Europe, if you just take the general agreed upon countries of Europe, let's include Ukraine and not Kazakhstan, Ukraine, Belarus, and Western Russia, and then draw a line straight down the middle of it, then you have the area on the west and the area on the east. So it is just a direction. Northern California is just a direction. It's more north than Southern California. Eastern Europe is just more east than Western Europe. That line, rather coincidentally, happens to correspond with the Iron Curtain line of the Soviet Union, and beyond the actual Soviet Union, those countries that were considered to be behind the Iron Curtain, just a term that some guy came up with, and then it stuck as a phrase to refer to this part of the world, not just Eastern Europe, but Central Asia, the Soviet Union, including all of the countries that were aligned politically as far as communism, and in other ways aligned with the Soviet Union. Hungary, of course, not part of the Soviet Union, but considered to be behind the Iron Curtain at that time. And so you go down the map, Poland, Czechoslovakia, which of course is now Czech Republic and Slovakia, Hungary, Romania, Armenia and Georgia, again, two other countries that it's debatable whether they are part of Europe or not. But certainly culturally, they are more similar to Europe than to Asia or the Middle East. So I understand that there is a issue with that whole past history reality, and that people want to, get beyond that. And it's been 30 years since the Iron Curtain, etc. But again, it is just a direction. It's just, we have north, south, east, west. That can't be changed. You have the northern part of Europe, the western part of Europe, southern, eastern. It is still relevant to refer to the eastern part of Europe. So, no offense intended or anything in referring to Eastern Europe. Just, I was in the more western part of Europe, and as I mentioned in a video, which is basically why I am mentioning this now, making this video and then addressing this particular topic, then when I was in Austria and said that I was going to Eastern Europe, then there were some comments from people disagreeing with the phrase. One person said, Eastern Europe only refers to Russia. Everything else is Central Europe. Russia is a long ways north. That doesn't really make sense to me to say that that is the only country that qualifies as Eastern Europe. It is debatable. But I would say embrace Eastern Europeanness, because there's a lot of great stuff about Eastern Europe. And yes, it is past history, a long ways in the past at this point. That whole phase of the USSR and everything, communism. No more communism in this part of the world anyways. But the directions are still relevant, even as this part of the world has advanced considerably. Of course, the old towns haven't changed a whole lot, but in many, many ways, then the countries have made progress in leaps and bounds as far as freedom and business, the choice, of goods in the supermarkets and whatnot. Like, of course, I was never here during the time of the USSR. I was very close. I was in Greece in 1990, considered going into Yugoslavia, in which case I could say now that I was behind the Iron Curtain, although that also is, debatable whether Yugoslavia was Iron Curtain or not. But times have changed, and this part of Europe has changed a lot over the past several decades, for the better, for the most part. And so that leads into why I love Eastern Europe, why I really like traveling in Eastern Europe, because it is different from Western Europe. There are similarities, of course. I mean, there's differences between all the countries in Western Europe. There's differences in Spain from one side of the country to the other. There's differences all over the place. But there are some, general similarities you can make and distinctions you can make. with the various parts of Europe. And there's just a different feeling, a different energy in Eastern Europe. Different architecture, of course, different languages. And on that subject, I will say, I know absolutely nothing about Hungarian. When I checked into my hotel, then I asked her how to say hello and thank you in Hungarian, and I've forgotten. I won't even attempt it. But it sounded nothing like the Romance languages. You know, Italy is nearby, but to the best of my understanding, Hungarian is not Romance language. Of course, Romanian is. So you have very distinct differences between some of the countries around here. Many are Slavic, and so then there are more similarities. But from Hungary to Romania, and then of course Georgia and Armenia, totally different alphabet, different language, etc. But I mean, that is part of the fun and interest of Eastern Europe, is learning about these countries and cultures that you haven't heard nearly as much about as Italy and France and the Netherlands and England, Ireland, Spain, etc. Western Europe is more familiar to many in, especially you could say America, Canada, Australia even, than so many more movies set in those countries. Eastern Europe still, even now, remains more enigmatic, mysterious, less known. It's just a matter of unfamiliarity, but that is one of the main things that makes Eastern Europe interesting to explore, is the fact that it is less known, and so it is more of a foreign land. So I guess you could say that that is kind of the first reason why I really like traveling in Eastern Europe, just because it is less known and there's a bit more of a curiosity element of learning about this part of the world that you don't see a lot of movies set in Hungary or Moldova or Romania, or hear about what's really happening here. Another reason as a traveler, which will be very apparent to those who have seen my previous videos in Switzerland and Austria, is the prices. You get into Eastern Europe and it is a pretty reliable phenomenon that the more east you go, the cheaper it gets. That's just the reality. Hungary is not very cheap. You saw my room there, $80 or so for an average room. I did see some less expensive options though, definitely compared to Switzerland and Austria. There were some rooms for like $50. And so as we head east, it is definitely getting cheaper, and will get much cheaper going into some of the other countries. And so if you're looking for somewhere to travel that isn't gonna break your wallet, then Eastern Europe is a great choice. I was in Bulgaria, I think that was last year, and the prices were just unreal. In Sofia, in the capital, like going into a nice restaurant and then looking at the menu, it was like a double take on my part. I had to kind of switch my brain to comprehend how affordable the prices were, because it was like this whole plate of food for like $4 or $5, you know, with like a few sides or whatever. For $10 you can get a big meal and a drink. or even less. And Bulgaria is a really nice country, perfectly safe, clean. It's really no less like modernized really than Switzerland or Germany. A little, but not much of a difference. You don't really even notice like that Bulgaria seems, you know, like a poor country or whatever. It just doesn't feel that way at all. Perfectly good roads and trains, buses, nice cities, completely comparable with in Western Europe, and yet for whatever, you know, kind of mysterious economic reason, things are like a quarter of the price or less to eat and sleep and take a train or a bus there. And so that is, of course, as a traveler, assuming you don't have unlimited money, which pretty much none of us do. If you're watching this channel, Switzerland definitely kind of broke the wallet for me there. That was basically me just kind of splurging because I wanted to see Zermatt and get into the Alps there. But I was over budget there, losing money basically. And so that is one of the reasons, other than just the Schengen issue, why I was headed east. It's just such a relief to be able to order another side, another glass of wine if you want or whatever, and not think about like, my God, is this meal going to be $80 or even $50 or something? So that is another big advantage to everywhere in Eastern Europe. There isn't a country in Eastern Europe that you can say has those crazy prices. Poland is one of the more expensive. I guess Estonia is probably the most expensive Eastern European country, but none of them compare to the prices you're going to pay in various countries in Western Europe. Even Spain was surprisingly expensive when I was there. It seems like prices in Europe are really going up. In general, even Greece was more expensive than I expected, and seems to have been more expensive than previous visits. So, you know, it kind of seems like Europe is just going through the roof with inflation. It's a problem around the world right now. But we'll see as I head into other countries around here what the prices are like these days. Of course, Slovenia, Croatia, getting very, very touristy, and prices going up there for sure. Croatia is not a particularly cheap country anymore. Another reason why I like Eastern Europe is there's just kind of less outside influence. Less change, even though, as I said, there's been a lot of progress over the decades, but there's something kind of more authentic about the countries and cultures having been kind of more isolated and less influenced by outside forces, you know, other countries, etc. Really nice square here. I'm assuming this is obviously the main square, and this is the cathedral that I actually had plugged into Google Maps that I was walking towards from my hotel there. And so there's just kind of more of a authentic feel of the continuity of the culture, for better or for worse. You know, obviously that can have drawbacks of less progress or less open-mindedness or whatever, but it is just a feature of the countries of Eastern Europe that there has been less influence by outside forces and cultures as compared to in Western Europe. And then another reason, which kind of goes along with having been more isolated and being farther away from Western Europe, both geographically and culturally, is just the fact that it is kind of more of a challenging traveling experience. English is spoken less, depends on the country. Bulgaria, then it was amazing how much English was spoken. But here in Hungary, to the best of my understanding, then, like outside of Budapest, or Budapest if you prefer, then there is going to be less English spoken by regular people. But in other ways as well, then it is just kind of a bit more of a kind of raw and real challenging traveling experience because of those reasons of being less familiar and less of the language, more of a difference in language. If I'm in Italy, I can at least look at something in Italian and maybe get a general sense of what it's about, just because the language looks similar. I can pick out words. But yeah, here, Aradi Vertano Kutia. Those words do not look the tiniest bit familiar relative to the Romantic languages, Spanish, Italian, French, Portuguese, etc. Okay, I think that I am retracing my steps here. This video definitely turned out to be a lot longer than I expected, but the idea was just to walk and talk and throw out a little information and some questions also for people to answer. But that is definitely one of the elements going into Ukraine, before the war of course, but assuming that you could travel to Ukraine, very different from traveling in Western Europe as far as navigating the country, figuring things out. Georgia and Armenia especially quite different. And so it's kind of that traveling element of it's more difficult, and that is part of the draw. The interest is to get into places that are less familiar, trickier to get around, figure things out. But you kind of feel like you're, farther from home, farther from the familiar. And that is the essence of travel, basically, is being in places where it's all new, it's all mysterious. Just going to check the language again here. Miłomlek, Rokoko, Kop, Stulusu, Lako Hazapot, Vigen, 1989. So, same letters at least, the Latin alphabet. But those words just do not look the least bit comparable to what I'm familiar with. Okay, time for me to find somewhere to take a seat. Glass of wine sounds nice. Get some food, and let's check the prices, see what they're like here in Hungary compared to Austria and Switzerland. Austria is about maybe 45 minutes, something like that. I forget if I got sidetracked here, but at the beginning of the video, when I was talking about why I ended up here in Gyor, I think that I didn't complete my thought there, but somebody had recommended Sopron, and so I saw that on the map as being close to Austria and a good place to stop. And then in the course of learning about Sopron, then I saw that Gyor was nearby and was kind of comparable. And then I was checking hotels, and there wasn't much availability and nothing affordable in Sopron, but there was in Gyor, and so that is how I ended up coming here. Also, I'd mentioned in my video in Salzburg, which was filmed just yesterday, that I had a train ticket already reserved to Vienna, Austria, that was today. As I arrived at the train station this morning, luckily about 20 minutes early, then I looked up at the signboard to see the platform number for that train, and I saw that that train was going to Budapest. The same train, it was stopping in Vienna and then continuing to Budapest. And Gyor here is right on the way to Budapest, and so I thought, wow, that train might be stopping in Gyor, in which case I don't have to deal with getting off in Vienna and changing. I was gonna, get off the train and go to the ticket office and figure out when the next train was to Gyor, but I went into the ticket office there in Salzburg and confirmed, yes, it was stopping here, and then I paid for a supplemental, edition so that I had a seat all the way to here. So anyways, that's the story of ending up in Gyor. Okay, let's try one of these touristy restaurants on the main square and see how much it costs. Okay, there's one issue. So they use the forint, which I knew, but I haven't gotten around to getting any forint yet. I also have no idea how much those prices are, so hopefully they take a card, otherwise I need to find an ATM. I don't think there's going to be anywhere that I can change. I have some euros left over. But probably can't change those. Who knows, maybe I can use the euros here or something, but I'll ask if they take a credit card. Let's see how the English is. I'm going to guess those are reasonable prices. Alright, so far so good. Both of the waiters that I spoke to spoke some English. There's English on the menu here. Cold appetizers and soups. Let's take a look at the prices. Caesar salad. Let's check a main course. Okay, so everything is around 4,000 to 5,000 forint. I have here xe.com. Let's plug in 5,000. See what that is. I really don't know. Okay, it isn't. Thank you. It isn't as cheap as I thought, but it's still quite reasonable, especially coming from further west. So 5,000 is $15. So that fish dish is $16, $17. See, compared to Bulgaria, then it is expensive in Hungary, but definitely cheaper than Austria or Switzerland. So spaghetti bolognese, that is $12 or something. So, moderate prices. Not cheap, not crazy expensive. And we got a nice looking glass of wine. And I think that I'm going for this one. Beef stew with homemade pasta. Marhaparkot. Hazi Tarhanyaval. See, those words are just so different and, strange but cool looking. I like the sounds. Marhaparkot. Tarhanyaval. Beef stew just sounds so boring and normal and uncreative. Those desserts look amazing. I've been going for white wine lately rather than red, which I used to always just have red, but I guess it's kind of a summer thing. It's more refreshing. Well, that was fast. You can see the bells are still going, so that tells you it hasn't been very long. It was literally about 2 minutes. They obviously had it all heated up and ready to go. Looks good, smells good. I think it's gonna be good. So that was very good. I also got a bottle of water there. And then got the bill here, and it turned out I can actually pay in euros because I have euros left over from Austria. So it was 6,860 forint for 1906 euro. So I'm curious about their exchange rate. Normally, in this situation, they would give kind of a bad exchange rate. Let's see how it compares to xe.com. I haven't entered it in yet. 6,860. So 6,860. 1806. So it's an extra euro, paying by euros, but that isn't all that bad. So I paid with my euros. I had a 20 euro note and then gave them an extra 2 euro coin as well. So paid 22 with the tip there. But still, not bad for a full meal with wine, and the bottle of water was also a charge there. So not crazy cheap, but very reasonable.